understood, because I've seen readers complain about that online, like, oh, come on, I know who's talking, you know?
Yeah.
And I realize that someone's reading it, but like, especially if you like listen to something or read something from like the 1950s or that, you can tell the difference. So, maybe do that little experiment as well.
I said one final thing on that, because that's, so regarding Bob and Nikki, that's it. There's literally no attribution for like sometimes 4 or 5 pages in a row.
And
So-
there's a balance here.
There's,
Yes, so it's something to think about, like, so for us, it makes it, difficult, and our prep work has to be really, really tight. But for the listener, once we execute that, it's, if those characters have separation, it's a real smooth ride.
Right, but you do wonder in that case how the reader of the book is actually is figuring it out.
Oh, their eyes, yes, absolutely.
Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a happy medium for sure. So you touched on casting, Harmon, and I know this is not a panel about casting. Actually, I think there's one tomorrow. I think Chris Abernathy's doing it. But I did, we, as Harmon mentioned, a publisher like us, we have a casting department that is, has listened to thousands and thousands of hours of audio and has decades of experience and performance experience themselves of how, the right voice is going to, be able to deliver the characters that you have, envisioned. So I don't want to, because that'll be dealt with tomorrow, but just sort of fundamentally, when you're thinking about casting as self-publishing in audio, I think doing what Harmon suggested, which is, going to your category and listening. Like I'm in the acquisitions department, and I talk to a lot of authors who never listen to audiobooks, and that's great. That's what we're here for. Like we are, we're the experts in audio. You're not expected to be, but if you are going to tackle this yourself, you do need to kind of take on a bit of expertise. And I definitely think listening to audiobooks is a great way to start, preferably ones published by Podium. But fundamentally think about, as my main character, a woman, or is it a man? If it's a fantasy world, is it a, kind of Game of Thrones-ish, English-y speaking world, or could it be kind of is it a, non-national, if it's futuristic sci-fi, is this a world where there aren't countries anymore, and there aren't, Russian speakers? So, keeping in mind those things as you're, working through your book and maybe taking some notes on, what those characters are and what are you going to need to get from your narrator, so that when you do engage with a narrator, you have a good list of things that you're looking for. So I have a question for Harmon. So we've worked on a number of titles together under both your names, and when you come to me, you usually have an idea in mind of who you're looking for. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacts your writing when you're thinking about a particular narrator that you want to work with?
And I always regret coming with, because like when I have come without, I love the surprises that like they can provide. Like for a Kafer Necromancer with Claude Andrew is so amazing for that series. And but I usually follow them, maybe my market maybe way too closely. But anyone who's in my market, like we all follow it very, very closely. And so I kind of see who's coming up and who's doing well, and then who I've also listened to. Like, so when I came to her with Travis Baldry already in mind, like I'd listened to Cradle, I'd met Baldry, like I wanted to work with him. He did Sacred Cat Island, we wanted an award for it. He's doing my series War Priest. When I came with Andrea Parsnow, I had worked with her for her Finished Hour book before, and like I just love working with her. Of course, she's like really, really backed up because of Wandering and things she does with SBT and things like that, but like I really, really wanted to work with her. And so it's part of pleasing my audience, who they already like, when I come with someone, and then also like who can do my work very well. And that's what it always to me comes back, and weirdly back to the musician aspect of things, because if someone understands the rhythm of my writing, I can hear it within like 30 seconds. 30 seconds to a minute, like that this person knows how to read my writing. Like Justin in this room knows how to read my writing, and like it's just an immediate click, and it's easy for the narrator because like it's like no challenge to them. You know, they're not doing like a translated Russian text or something, which some of them have to do. And it's easier for me because I know what their voice sounds like, and I write like half speech to text, half by hand, as I call it, which is it's just because I had a carpal tunnel syndrome. And so I think of their voice in mind when I'm doing it as well, and I'm already speech to texting it, editing it, you know, of course, like on a keyboard. So it creates a natural flow in my thinking.
So for you three narrators here, how do authors get in touch with you if they want to work with you? What's the approach?
Sometimes authors will, if they're already working with publisher, you can request narrators through publishers, or, you know, Google, I mean, websites.
It's surprising how many narrators are
ACX.
quite hidden.
Yes.
Yes.
I was
Casting.
trying to hire, I'm sorry, I'll let you.
No, I was saying ACX is another,
You can message
word of
through that
mouth.
system.
Lots of authors will contact, I get approached by authors because they, like Harmon was saying, have heard me on other series, and they're like, mine is similar to this that you did, and we want you to do that you did there. You know, but yeah.
I do a fair amount of casting for books that I'm not appropriate for, and I can't tell you the number of times I could not find, you know, they said, I want Bob Smith. I'm like, okay, I cannot find this narrator anywhere. No website, no, it's maddening. I prefer to be contacted via carrier pigeon. It's a little slow, but it gets the job done. I mean, I have a profile on ACX, email, and it's helpful to know ahead of time what genre your book is, what you're looking for, how long it is, what your desire, what you're thinking of in terms of rate, perhaps might be a good thing to talk about. Because we don't want to waste your time and vice versa if we're not in sync on that. Your schedule, like when do you want this done?
Yeah, and when you say length, do you want word count?
Yeah.
Because I think some people think in
Yes.
page counts, but.
Page
we
count
think
doesn't
in
mean
word
anything.
Page
It
count
does.
doesn't mean
word.
anything, yeah.
Word count.
Word count, we can translate, it's about 9,500 words per hour. Ends up being a finished hour.
You talk fast.
I was
I
gonna
talk
say,
fast,
you talk
yeah,
fast.
it actually
You really do.
Rest ends up being closer to 10,000. Hey, it's more value. So roughly, 100,000 words is gonna be about 10 hours, so it's not crazy math. Figure it out. And, yeah.
Yeah, we have the marketplaces, Find a Way is developing a new marketplace too, similar to ACX, where, they can reach us through our profile. But most of my connections have been through, believe it or not, through producers and actual publishing houses that have spun around and said, we're not carrying this, we're not gonna carry this book, but we think you're great for it, and it still has life, that kind of stuff. So that's been interesting to get a few books in that respect. But yeah, all that ammo is fantastic and allows us to, get through some of the metal and figure out whether or not the parties can come to a nice agreement.
And are there other things that, other than, word count or anything, do you want to see a snippet of the book, or do you want to
Yeah.
receive the entire Word document?
No.
Not before prep, no.
Yeah.
I can look that up on, send me a link to Amazon.
Yeah.
And I'll look at the read now. So another suggestion is if you're working on ACX, message the narrator first, don't just send an offer. It's actually rather jarring. Just so to get, you'd think that we'd be like, yeah, I got an offer, but without any communication ahead of time, it can be a little
Scary.
frightening, and because there's so much garbage on ACX, right? So we like to get a message ahead of time talking about schedule and deliverables, et cetera, as opposed to, here's what it is, give me
And
my
I
book.
need it next week.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because we can't counter and say,
Yeah.
because ACX kind of sucks, but. In
Well,
in
actually,
terms
this
of
is-
that, edit that out.
Actually, you're making me think of something that is a danger on ACX right now, and that is pirated.
Oh, yes.
Pirated stuff,
Yeah.
right?
So, this is, we've had this situation with some of the titles that we have under contract with authors, that suddenly a pirated version appears on the Audible marketplace, and we're like, we're publishing that in 6 weeks, and someone has done this. They have sent an offer through ACX to an unsuspecting narrator with a pirated book, and that narrator has gone ahead and spent hours of their time producing it through royalty share. So they've wasted their time, and then and it's put up for sale. So then you waste the author then. Oh, it's just a nightmare. So one of the things that we've been advising authors is make sure that you've claimed your audio edition as soon as you publish your ebook. So even if you don't have immediate plans to make an audiobook, just in Author Central, make sure that you've claimed it. And if you don't know
All versions.
all versions, and that will then prevent somebody, a bad actor, from being able to do that through ACX.
Somebody found an old paperback copy or whatever of Dune,
Oh my goodness.
put it up there, and some narrator did it.
Yeah, Harmon's like, I got dude.
I'm sorry. You just don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Yeah,
Like,
I
oh,
should've
boy.
It's, at the end of the day, he was a victim, but
Yeah.
also,
Well, leader.
Well, he might have thought it was in the public domain.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
to
a-
his credit, he might have. I mean,
That's-
Frank Abbott hasn't been dead that long.
that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's a
that's
Yeah.
the generous way I'm thinking about it.
As someone who's doing public domain stuff now for some classics, that's that the gun. We're stretching that gun out a little.
She's being
What's that?
You're being diplomatic.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure public domain, I'm sure will continue to change as Disney, gets older.
One thing to add to that that I thought was important for, if you are, look at we were talking about difficulty in finding narrators. Like most semi-professional narrators have a website where they have samples because they want to make money and do this as a job. So like if you are doing it yourself on ACX, and by doing it yourself I mean like you're paying per finished hour, or you're doing a royalty share, at least look at their website. Like there is a little, some of the onus is on you a little bit to like see who these people are.
Yeah.
Generally they're actors or they have something related to that field.
Yeah.
And they should have a website, like unless they have a bunch of pen names.
As an example, like I work in probably 7 different genres, mostly in audiobooks, but I'm in gaming, I'm in commercial. I'll do a TV promo every once in a while. So all of those things are available on the website as well, and that's why it's an aggregator of sorts for everyone to come on and check us out.
Also, make sure they have a home studio.
Yes.
Yeah. There are still some dinosaur narrators out there who go in only and have no way of recording other than, and that's gonna amp your costs way up because there's studio time and engineer and all that other stuff, so make sure you're not wasting your own time if they don't have the goods. to
Yeah,
record.
well, and as a publisher, we are engaging with some of those dinosaurs and putting them in studio and,
As
paying
in-
for those
right.
as our, as part of our.
I mean, if you got the money to do that,
Well, just
that's.
and then the other thing, I guess, to keep in mind is, some have agents. And so, that's another, that would probably be quite a hill to climb for an indie. I mean, we deal with, voice actors agents all the time, and that's kind of, that's what we deal with. What?
Most agents, as far as for, what I've found is, most agents do not have you mark off audiobooks on your contracts
Correct.
when
Yeah.
you sign with them. Only if it's for the people who don't really know about the audiobook
Yeah.
world, and they aren't paying attention, and they're marking. So, that should be the case, but when we're dealing with celebrities and
Yeah.
people of status, that's when they're gonna pay the quote and do that.
Yeah, we cast, people who are on, games and, and have
Yeah, that makes
representation.
We are not people of status.
Oh, come on.
When you're
I mean,
on-
he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Broadway actors and, that's, triple threats. Quadruple
Right.
threat.
TikTok stars.
Victoria, I don't wanna slow you down, just
No,
one
it's
more thing
fine.
for the ammo for them to tell us.
Yeah.
If it's a one-off or a series.
That's
Oh,
yeah.
Really
Yeah.
important. So if it's a one-off, we know, okay, we can schedule it easy, we're not worried about characters that might not be leads, turning into leads, that kind of stuff.
But it's okay if
So-
you don't know yet. If you don't know
Right.
which book one becomes.
Yeah, we have, as the
Sorry, that's
musicians,
just-
we have similar conversations with our authors when we're bringing them on board. It's like, well, how many do you think you're gonna
Yeah.
do? It's like- And it's market driven, right? We're all,
Totally.
independent creators, and so if it's not selling after book 3, well, then it's gonna be 3 books. And it's keep on going,
Right.
with respect to the story, obviously. So actually, that kind of leads in, my next question was about pet peeves, which we've, touched on a little bit, but is there any, just go deep.
Jeff, you wanna take this first?
What? I mean, I don't wanna go negative, but let me start.
It's pretty fun. Is there anything that has?
I don't have any pet peeves in term. Okay, so it's helpful to have information gotchas up front, because sometimes in our prep we might miss something. For example, I was doing a book called, and the main character, we go through, blah, 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 page 365, I'm going to the store, he said, in his Canuck accent.
Oh, no.
What?
Oh, no.
What the hell is a Canuck accent? And why was I told this on page 365 as opposed to page 3?
I didn't even know you played hockey.
Yeah,
Did
so,
you say story?
sorry. Well, he was an action hero, so,
He doesn't apologize.
Sorry, I punched you in the face. So those sorts of things, and yeah, it's our job to ferret those out, and in prep, but it's also really helpful to know up front how you think your characters sound. Romance authors are really good at this. We did a series where she gave us a sheet of her muses.
Yeah.
All the heroes, it was Liam Hemsworth and Chris Hemsworth and the Chris's. But that's helpful to know who do you think this character sounds like and what's their personality like. And we do our best to fulfill that.
To add to that, and briefly add to that, is like if the narrator needs to know the spoilers way ahead of time. So like as much as you want to be like, oh, this is my juicy spoiler, and I have that for Cowboy Necromancer. Like he's the only person I told. Like I told Podium, he has to know what's happening with who this person actually is. The narrators need to know that because you want them to be interested in it, obviously, and they will be when they're reading, but you don't want to end up on page 365 and it's a Canuck, and they're like, oh great. And that's not really a spoil, but they really need to know if something's coming up, or if a character in the first book, maybe they just have a few scenes or something, but they're going to become part of the main cast in the second or third book. They need to know that so they're not using a throwaway voice, because it might be, it's like this character is going to operate throughout the series. So that's something just to keep in mind. It doesn't mean that you have to plan your whole series out, but if you have a big spoiler coming, or you have characters like I want to introduce them, but I want to focus on certain characters in the first or second book, make sure that they know that.
By throwaway, you mean using the hardest accent in the world.
Scottish.
And
Oh my
then,
gosh, it's back.
and then having to do it for half a page,
Add a little flavor and then-
every page for book 2.
The only other thing I would add to the pet peeves, and this rarely happens truly, but when it does, you're just like, oh. So as was discussed, giving as much information up front is very valuable and helpful so that we can perform in the way that you hear it in your head. Once we have performed, once the book is done, if you're listening back at that point and thinking, yeah, that's not how I heard that character, well, at that point, it's a little too late. So especially if you're going through ACX, you get that 15-minute approval checkpoint up front. Use that. Feel free to say to the narrator, hey, I'd like in these 15 minutes, a little bit of this chapter, a little here, a little there. That happens sometimes. Because if in the first chapter, the first 15 minutes didn't give you what you want, and then you hear it after, at that point, it could end up costing you a whole redo, which is not fun for anybody, because then it's not as organic and as, so
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Related to that, this is one that I think is so important, related to that is, we'll probably get to it, but like, you don't want the narrator commenting while you're writing the book. I don't comment while the narrator, like, they're the performer, they're creative, a lot of them are actors, a lot of them, especially once you get to a certain level, they're all professionals. And it's never going to be exactly what you heard in your head, because what you heard in your head is like your own psychic voices talking to you.
Sure.
So like, or psychotic voices. And so trust, like, especially once you get, like, you're with publishers and stuff, just trust that they know what they're doing, they know what they're doing. And you don't want to go through editing their stuff. You don't want to go through like, oh, I listened up to chapter 6 and then, I decided I didn't like this voice. Like, don't be that person, because you wouldn't want that person on your manuscript. You wouldn't want someone like standing over your shoulders, like, because that can get very, very draining. If you've ever worked with like a developmental editor who wasn't great, then that can get very, very draining. So just remember that you're working with talented, creative people who you've already done your part. Let them do their part. You've already agreed on the voices or whatever that makes sense. Let them do their part.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little comment about this in my list of questions here, but yeah, we definitely encounter that, and it's awkward. I mean, there are definitely mistakes that occur. Everybody makes mistakes, and if a narrator hasn't done the thing that was agreed in advance, and that is like really important for the book, then that is a mistake, and we will go back and get that corrected. And it's part of our production process to have proofing, and the proofer makes sure that the way that character is speaking in chapter 20 is the same way that they were speaking in chapter 5. And so that level of proofing is part of our production. But at the same time, once an author starts listening to it, other things can definitely come up. And ideally, we're not going back unless it's something that is, a real disaster,
Right.
and can impact the listener's enjoyment of the story. Because yes, the author is an important listener, but we're making something for the market. And an audiobook listener is probably not going to notice, like the small thing, or they're going to potentially enjoy the thing that sounds like nails on the blackboard for the author. And that tension can be, pretty stressful. But sort of the letting go that you guys have advised, I think is great advice. We try to, and actually, just talking about making corrections, in an ebook, you can make corrections so easily. But with audio, that becomes, that's really challenging, and making too many corrections can make the whole thing like a patchwork quilt, which is not ideal. And so another point I would say, advice-wise, when you're delivering your text to your narrator, whether that be through a publisher or directly, let it be the text that you're very, very happy with, and that will not be having more changes.
Copy edit.
Copy preferably, definitely copy edited,
Please.
and yeah, mistakes happen, and we can
Totally.
take a boomerang, ideally before the narrator has started recording, and so this happens, and we work exclusively with indies, so we're very familiar with what goes on, but I've had some nightmares with texts that are not final.
A lot of this stuff, if it's obvious that it's a typo, we fix on the fly, or our editor, whether it's your publisher or on our own, will catch it.
If it's obvious.
If it's obvious, but sometimes if the intent and you're just like, what, then usually you go back to the author. What were you actually trying to say here? And we catch it as it's recording before we're not just like reading, this makes no sense, I'm just gonna read it.
Yeah, we'll catch, continuity errors, narrators are amazing, you guys are amazing at catching continuity errors.
There's no better proof than
Yeah.
reading it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's saying it out loud and going, that's not, that word, that's not a word, okay. And so that's when we find all those little nooks and crannies that have to be smoothed out, and we do that, a lot of those on the fly. The other thing I wanted to mention was, and Podium is great about it, sometimes, depending on the situation, we may have contact with the author, we may not, with certain publishers. Podium is terrific about, especially in a lot of the genres that we're dealing at 20 books, military sci-fi, creating new worlds,
Yeah.
creating new universes, all the different terms that you've created, how do you say them?
Yes.
How do you say them?
Yes.
We usually get phonetic stuff written down.
We use Excel spreadsheets. I
Audio's
just-
easier.
Voicemails help too.
Yes.
We prefer voicemails as
Much more
narrators.
than
Just
phonetics.
say it into your phone and send it.
Yeah, and so that will make everything so, easy, and for the proofers, they have it to be
Yes.
able to refer to, and it's all like one big happy family.
Totally.
Nice and smooth, totally clean post-production. But practice saying those, habazana na ma na na.
Well, I have a very basic one. I don't know if there's any military sci-fi here people, but HUD. Not all narrators understand that it's HUD, not
It's not
HUD.
HUD.
And I heard
It's
just
HUD.
the other day that is, and the narrator made that
Maybe we should
mistake.
catch
and I was like,
Yeah.
And it's carbine, not carbine.
Harvey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if there's
Is it?
specifics about, things that you
That's
think
awesome.
Scott me that.
And if if the author is,
Canadians do.
I was gonna say, the author is not, if you're
Sorry.
hiring an American narrator, but you as an author are not American, and you say tomato, tomato, you need to express or cast correctly, or whatever, so that it's not wrong, it's just
To branch off what he said, so I've worked with Neil Helligers before, who I love working with, and when I would send him text, like I'd be like, yeah man, it's at a beta read, all that, and then he would send it back and like, I am the alpha reader, here's the final mistakes, and I'm like, I always thought that was funny, and then he would send me later on like, okay, here's alpha, it's been alpha read now it's been recorded, here are like the final 15 little very small things, so they pick up everything because they're reading it aloud.
He sent you the copy edits?
They were just like 15 minutes.
So that's not standard. We don't generally we don't,
I gotta be honest, I do that
one
too.
or two, sure.
Do you really?
Yes, it's because
Literally never done
it's
that.
like it's almost like pride because I'm good at it.
Yeah.
Like I find everything, like I'm the guy in the park that walks around and sees a sign and has an extra T in there and I'm like, oh no, what have you done to me? So I like that, and it just helps the whole ecosystem. When it's small, if it's a disaster, we're talking a different story.
You're a
That's
better
not-
person than I am.
We're talking 20,
I don't have time.
25.
Let me put this in the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
All right, we've only got 10 minutes. So
Sorry,
I wanted to
sorry.
get to duet, because duet is very relevant these days.
Sure.
Very popular in the harem genre, and coming into romance, and it's, so I know you two are a duet pair. I think, Chris, you do duet too.
We're in our first series with Amanda. We're working on it for you guys.
Great.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the mechanics.
Sure.
Are you crammed and moved together? How does it work?
So there's a difference between dual and duet, and Jeff and I do a lot of both. So when it's dual narration, if it's female point of view, I read those, whether it be scenes or the whole chapter, and if it's male, the male, Jeff does. And in those situations, we have booths next to each other, but we're in our own booths. When it's duet, we're in the booth together, and it's like a radio play. And so whoever point of view, that's who does the narrator, but then the other one will do the dialogue of that Jennifer, which is really fun as actors because we get to play off of each other. And when you know someone, the chemistry, it's just a natural thing. Also with dual narrators, there's a communication that's super important, that whether you're working directly with the narrator or through a publisher, that they are in touch from the moment you have the manuscript, because that's part of the prep of deciding, character voices, and then usually we'll use a Dropbox folder, and so we share anytime any new character comes up, we're saving a sample of that, so that if he had it, then I'm matching what he did to keep that, cohesiveness.
Yeah, it's
So-
critical part of little inside baseball too.
Yeah.
How are you
Wow,
doing?
you covered it all.
Yeah. So are you doing duet in the same booth, or are you using technology?
We are, as of now, using technology. Now, I have a production company, and so for that company, I've actually built a 4x7 in my studio. So that will enable me to have duet capability in my actual home studio with, just outside of New York City. However, most, if right now, Amanda is in Tennessee on the series that we're doing. So we're using Discord. And so far as technically speaking, it's, in order to keep it smooth, it's a little rudimentary where, like, when we make mistakes, and we know they're a mistake, we use dog clicker. And the dog clicker allows your lead track, because we're both recording at the same time, so we just make sure we time the start of our files together, so when you place them into what we call a DAW, where you see both of the soundtracks and with the WAV files, they match up perfectly. And so all we need is the dog clicker, the cut makes a nice straight hard line there, so I know where that mistake is, and then that gets edited out.
Digital
So-
audio workstation.
Yeah.
So then, after a little bit of cleanup of all the mistakes, which is normal, which wouldn't be in if we were narrating normally, because we would be punch and rolling in that situation, which means every time we make a mistake, we get right before the mistake. And so again, when it's uploaded to whoever's doing the post-production for us, it's a completely clean file, and you can't hear any cuts in it at all. That's what we end up sending, but we end up sending 2 separate tracks that are completely matched.
Interesting, 2 different approaches. Ready for it.
Well, ideally, you'd love to be in the same studio.
Well, yeah.
But it's,
Yeah.
nowadays, hopefully maybe in mid-2022,
Yeah.
like there are a couple of things that we have planned with Audible, which is only a 20-minute.
Jersey.
Yeah, I'm right next to them, but they haven't opened up yet.
Oh,
We're not.
really?
Yeah, we're not. They're hoping February 22, but again, that's not. It's
Yeah.
not written in stone anymore.
Gotcha.
We're finding more dual in more genres. We did a sci-fi trilogy,
Mhm.
Heather and I, and it's all about how it's written, right? If it's male POV for one chapter, female POV for another chapter. And I would love to see more of that
Yeah.
in genres that are typically dominated by male heroes.
Listeners love that. They love hearing
Yeah,
that.
that's the RPG.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the reviews of multicast, I mean, audiobook listeners, we find really do love a single voice, and
Mhm.
really, a narrator that can deliver female voices if they're male, and male voices if they're female. Like, that's, I think, part of a skill set that sets apart
Mhm.
good narrators from people who don't know what they're doing. So we do the majority single voice
Oh, yeah, of
still,
course.
and authors who come to us and say, well, does the female bits need to be generally speaking, I mean, that the delivery of one single narrator does a great job, and that's what listeners love. So I had one final tip, and then we can have like 2 minutes for questions if you have any. So my and I don't know if most of you are experienced in getting your cover art. But one of the things that drives me crazy is when we take on a new series and the author doesn't have access to the audio cover art. And it's often because a designer has bifurcated their work, and and then you have to pay twice for it, and that I find quite frustrating. Just from you've paid for it, so you should have it, it's your asset. We'll pay for it again, it's fine, it's just like an extra layer of work that's just kind of annoying. So when you're getting your artwork, buy ebook, your print, and your audio, even if you have no plans for the audio, just so that you own it. High res, JPEG,
Mhm.
preferably optimized so that nothing important is in the bottom right for the only on Audible banner. And then you have it for yourself, or you have it to deliver to your audio publisher. No drama.
The PSD is helpful in that regard.
PSD is
Yeah, get the
tremendously
PSD.
helpful, but a lot of some designers won't
Won't
part
do it.
with those.
I can imagine.
But yes, if you can get the layered file, even more amazing. So.
Because they're like losing their original kind of
Yeah, like a lot of
sketches.
them are think that, the person who receives it is then gonna make changes to their work,
Okay.
which I get, and we don't, we're respectful of designers' work, but they lose control of their work. 2 minutes for questions?
Could I get a very quick names, because I missed that at the
Oh.
beginning with the video, just very quickly, please.
Victoria Gerken, Podium Audio.
Heather Costa, audiobook narrator.
Jeffrey Kafer, narrator.
Harmon Cooper, author.
Chris Shula, narrator.
Thank you.
All right, one question in the back.
Chris, why is it important for narrators to know when a non-lead may become a lead, perhaps in a future book?
It will affect the type of choice that we make, not only for the voice, but for the character, for the embodiment of the character. You know, to know a little bit about that character's journey forward, even though it won't be present when you hear it, it's got to match.
Okay.
And so, you know, for your hardcore listener group, they will know,
They
and
will.
they'll lambaste me if that changes.
Okay.
You know, you might be okay. But I, you know, so it's just about, it comes down to the information.
It's
Just
consistency.
giving the information, consistency, and it's an easy thing to do. It's just, it just, if you were going to make a change later on, it's just good to know how we did it originally. Say you said, you know what, I don't want that in the third book, you change your mind. You might change your mind on something, you say, you know what, that's not gonna, I'm gonna take my B plot and do something else with it.
Yeah.
That can happen too, but just understand as long as you know what we did originally and that it will work with whatever you're trying to do for the audio.
All right.
Andrew?
So, how much of a pain is it when an author says, I have no fixed voice for this character, please use your discretion?
No, it's a good thing, we
That's
enjoy
exactly
that.
what we want. Right, I mean, it's like putting a painting up and then saying, I want you to visualize this painting exactly this way. Like,
It's your interpretation.
it's, remember, when you write a book, you may have a voice in your head, but the person reading it on Kindle, they don't have your voice in their head. So, we like creative freedom, absolutely.
I'm always quite vague. I'll create a character sheet and I'll put like YouTube videos like, I was inspired by this, something like this is fine, like that kind of thing. Because I work in terms of like maximum like creativity on that end, because every time I've done that, it's been better. Every time I've done it with cover artists, like I trusted them, like it's been way better than trying to like sit in there, well, I want to fix this or do this.
Yeah, no micro.
I'm a little, you know, me coming from the film and TV world and producing a little bit in that world, I actually prefer if, I don't know if this, I'm kind of losing my mind. I don't know if this is again like the antithetical to what you said, but I like to actually get inspirational stuff for characters, and if I'm communicating with an author, I ask them like, so what? Either if they are TV or film watchers or fans and fanboys, I will say, hey, what performance do you think this character? What if there's something in that neighborhood? Where do you like, and not the actor, because the actor can do 10 different, 12 different, 15 different things, but what performance, you know, on a particular TV show or film is like kind of lock solid for this particular character. Now that still may change, but it gives me like a baseline to go from, okay, that's where we're starting. As if this was a film and I got an audition and that character had specs on it that I had to follow. So I come from that world, so that's kind of, that helps me personally.
Awesome. Thank you. 9:02.